Welcome back to Weekend Joe, driven by Mungenast St. Louis Acura, Mungenast Burkard, Alton Toyota here on ClaibsOnline.com as we head out to the guest line and we welcome in from the GoJo and Golic podcast. He is Mike Golic Jr. What's going on, Mike? How you doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on, especially with I can't imagine how busy things are for you and your dad and everybody else there right now with the college football world just kind of being turned on its head and the football play. I mean, we have a super wild card weekend coming up, not just wild card weekend. It is super wild card weekend, and it seems like that's taking the back seat right now to all these coaching changes in college and pro.
It's been like a 30 for 30 worthy 24 hours in the world of sports. I don't think that's hyperbole. I was just getting ready to post our podcast for the day, and I try and usually think of some sort of kitschy topic bar. And I went to type the end of an era and realized this was the end of several eras. However, you slice it between not only Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, I think the two best coaches at their level of football in the history of the game, at the very least in my lifetime. And then, oh, by the way, Pete Carroll, who has a claim to very much be their peer, considering not only his success in the pro level, but also in college as the architect of the USC teams that built my college football fandom. I was a Notre Dame fan, but early 2000s USC transcended the sport. They were rock stars. They made so much of what was beautiful and romantic about college football a part of my life. So I think with all of those different tenures at their respective spots right now coming to an end, Nick Saban, we think, for his career, and Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll, at least at this juncture, it was a pretty wild 24 hours.
Yeah, the Pete Carroll one, you kind of look at it and, the Seahawks don't make the playoffs. He is getting up there in age, and he's been doing this for a real, real long time. And that one, when you see he's moving front office, that makes sense. Belichick, I mean, we've been talking about that since week 2 or 3 of the season as to whether or not he was going to make it all the way through. The Saban one, it feels like it just came out of nowhere, especially when I feel like a lot of pressure is off some of these college football coaches when you look at when you look at teams like a Georgia or an Alabama, like you're not fighting for that Final Four anymore. From here on out, it's a top 12, and you're pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot if you have one of these prestige programs.
Yeah, but I mean, for Nick Saban, the stress he's been under for such a long time and how that's changed recently, because you're right, it might not be where if Alabama lost 2 games in a year, the sky was falling. We were worried they were going to run Saban out of town if that ever happened. That might be the case, not be the case now, but there are a lot of other material changes in the sport. And one, I think we underrate being 72. Like, we look at all these guys as machines, but at some point they're humans and they've got other parts of their life they want to feed with family and loved ones and stuff like that. But also, I don't discount the fact, and I'm not blaming this outright, and I'm not saying that it's a net negative. I am for everything that's happened with name, image, and likeness. I am for the transfer portal and the independence and agency that affords players, but it's also a drastic change in roster building and the way that these coaches have to go about their lives. And for Nick Saban, you've done and accomplished so much. I did wonder if at some point a number of the coaches that were up there in age would say, all right, this is a good jumping off point for me to get out of the game and let somebody else handle all of these new changes that are coming to the sport.
So when you look at this, and I guess we haven't even, I mean, there still could be one more big shoe to drop with the potential of Jim Harbaugh making going back to the NFL with some of the things surrounding him. So right now, given the fact that Michigan still has a head coach, which job, college and pro, all things considered, would you say is the top job available?
So I think that Alabama, it's weird because I feel like people do a lot of oscillating on that because you're the guy following the guy, which from an outsider's perspective is seen as a bad thing. But we all know coaches. They're I don't say this in a negative way, but they've all got massive egos. They believe they can fix any player who's incredibly talented, and then in any situation they can be successful. So I don't doubt the desire from that standpoint. The expectation is going to be high at any school that you're at, but at Alabama, while I'd imagine there's going to be some roster attrition with players already jumping into the portal, guys decommitting because of this, if you're able to stabilize it pretty soon, the table is set with a program that operates at a very high level in terms of the resources around there, what the fan base and alumni base is used to as far as giving, and the facilities and other things that make this thing hum. So I think that's going to be a pretty desirable job. I think in the NFL level, you look at The Chargers, I think, get the nod from most everybody because of the Justin Herbert factor, despite fact that that organization has seemed somewhat cursed by injury through most of my modern adult lifetime watching football. I think having that question answered goes such a long way. If the Bears job had come open, that might have changed it a bit just because you've got the chance to hold the pen with a ton of draft capital. You could potentially trade Justin Fields and get the return from that also. And that team by the end of the season had displayed a stronger foundation. Offensively, the offensive line had come together with some of the recent draft picks. Defensively, the Montez Sweat acquisition had seemed to help stabilize that group overall in a way that, post Roquan Smith's departure hadn't been the case. And so that one would have been. The Bears are in an interesting spot now because of it. But I would say of the NFL jobs, the Chargers is the one that jumps out right away just because you've got the easiest course to answering the toughest question in pro sports, which is who's your quarterback.
And I wonder too how some of these coaching candidates, if they are going to wait, to see if Michigan opens up. And I mean, you talk about Nick Saban being 72, Andy Reid. If this could be the end of the line for him, and then you have a job opening where Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback, and I really think with 14 teams in the playoffs, I feel like one of these 14 teams, maybe even outside of the Chiefs, might go with a coaching change if they lose this weekend. So I don't think we're done yet.
I mean, think about, and I understand he likes to stir the pot, but think about where the Cowboys sit right now. Mike McCarthy was brought down there to help them win a Super Bowl the way that he helped the Green Bay Packers. Dak Prescott was given a contract extension a lot later in the proceedings than most of us would have thought was right. Now they sit here, and Jerry Jones came out, and when he was asked about Mike McCarthy's future, said, we'll take it game by game in the postseason and see, because Jerry likes to stir the pot. But I think in a much more material way, Dak Prescott's still due like $60 million next year. He's got an insane number that they did nothing to alleviate or mitigate. They didn't do what a lot of people thought with a quarterback of Dak's caliber who was in the MVP discussion for a large portion of this year, which is extend him, move that money around over a number of years, give yourself some cap relief in the immediacy so you can keep the core of this roster building in the right direction as some of the pieces age out. But they didn't go that route. So it makes me wonder what the immediate plan is if things were to go wrong earlier than expected for a team like the Cowboys. But you're right, I'm sure there could be others as well.
So we got 6 games this weekend, super wild card weekend, and we've spent the first about 10 minutes talking about everything other than the games that are kicking off on Saturday. First and foremost, I mean, for it to be a app only game on Peacock, they are going to break some records with this Dolphins Chiefs game. That is the marquee matchup this weekend, and NBC is going to win big with that being their game on Peacock.
Oh yeah, I mean the forget the NFL fandom alone. Obviously, you've got two really a diehard fan base, especially in the Chiefs fan base, but an incredibly passionate fan base as well for Miami that are going to flock to that. But then you got the Swifties too. I mean, they're going to want to watch Taylor's boyfriend play some ball. So,
I feel like Tua is the leading vote getter for the Pro Bowl. I mean, Tua, I guess you could say, is the most popular player in the NFL outside of all the Swift fans that latch on to Travis Kelce.
I mean, if you've ever seen or interacted with Tuanon online, you can understand they've got a very mobile force in the places that you would need to have the voting go on surrounding that quarterback who's been a lightning rod during his time there. And honestly, super interesting postseason coming up for Tua because now we're getting towards payday territory with him. He's a very good quarterback, but we saw at the end of the season in a couple of pivotal moments, it didn't necessarily look the way that you would want it to. And now I don't think this postseason should be an indictment on the decision you ultimately make with him. I think he's earned the opportunity to continue to be Miami's quarterback, especially the marriage of him and Mike McDaniel and how that's looked. But we understand that people prorate how you perform, especially in the postseason. And so going into this environment where it sounds like it is going to be cold in Kansas City, and that weather environment for a team in Miami that is designed to go fast and stretch the field and do all the things that we're used to seeing with them, going up against the Chiefs team that's a lot more close to the vest now. I mean, this iteration of the offense in the second year post Tyreek Hill, where, Travis Kelce has received more attention because they've struggled to find, now with Rashee Rice developing that way, but there had been talk about the viability of that wide receiver room. They'd struggled to protect a bit on the edges, and you're going up against a Miami team that's been robbed of so much of their edge rushing bite. I think I saw they just had to sign Justin Houston to a contract here because they were so devoid of edge players because of injury. Matchup-wise, it works out very well, I think, for Kansas City in a lot of ways in this game.
It is a 7 o'clock start time, and right now
Woo!
it is a high of 8. A
Oh,
high of 8 degrees
uh-uh.
and a low of -8 degrees. That's not factoring in any wind chill. What's the coldest game you've ever been to?
The coldest game I've ever the coldest game I've ever been in or around was like one I played in high school, and it was because it was right above the freezing point and it was raining. So we were damp and then cold. Like I played in games that were around, in single digits in South Bend where it's a snow game. We famously got pelted with snowballs losing at home on senior day to Syracuse, but I'm not bitter about that. But, yeah, in those kinds of bitter temperatures, it's even if you're the team that is quote unquote used to playing it, it's not fun. You don't like it. Having to try and figure out and negotiate all the pain that comes with being cold. You're more used to it than your counterparts. Like I remember we played a game in El Paso in the Sun Bowl against the Miami Hurricanes, and it was right at freezing. It was a slow Tuesday in South Bend, but it snow flurried. And we looked at them in the tunnel. We knew that game was over before it started. They had every bit of cold gear that they could muster. They were all huddled together in the tunnel. They looked like they were thoroughly miserable because of that. And while we weren't happy to be cold, we were also very used to it. So there's a definite factor in that comes with this time of year.
There's two different storylines in this postseason as far as momentum goes. You have the Bills that might be the hottest team right now in the NFL, not that are not the Ravens, the hottest team playing this weekend. And then you have a team like the Eagles that is just struggling right now. When you flip it into gear for the postseason, how important or how much of a factor do you think momentum's going to play?
I think that's a factor in you've got that feeling of seeing the ball go through the basket, right? You've got recent reps full of success. Like we used to, before football games when I was at Notre Dame, and the night before in the hotel, our coaching staff would play something called Mental Edge. It was basically a highlight reel. It was all the good plays that we had made up until that point in the season because they wanted to remind you this is what you're capable of. This is what you put on tape over and over again. Remember this feeling, go through the mental reps of it so that when you go out there tomorrow, that's something that you have ready access to mentally and you've got the reps built up physically to be able to execute. So for Buffalo, they do have a lot of that recently, and I do think that is important. And for Philadelphia on the opposite side, I think just as important as that is physically right now, they're just too beat up to party. Like I just saw a report that Jalen Hurts saying his finger is more banged up than he thought, and he shouldn't have probably gone back in that last game this last weekend against the New York Giants. And so you couple that with Devonta Smith, who didn't play in that game because I believe an ankle injury, A.J. Brown, who went down early in that game, and now your quarterback, who's dealing with a finger injury as the guy who's got to throw the damn football. All of that combined with, a bunch of bad reps recently that have piled up for this team. I don't know what to expect because, the team they're facing in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are home dogs, have sort of been a roller coaster all year, driven by Baker Mayfield, who's an incredibly gritty quarterback, who's also playing through injuries of his own right now.
So we have the 6 games this weekend, the 49ers and the Ravens with a bye. Mike, when I see you in Vegas here in a few weeks for the Super Bowl, who are we going to be talking about at that game?
I think we are going to be talking about, on the NFC side, the 49ers were my pick before the season got started. And I think while they've slowed down over their, full on steamroll through the rest of the NFL, the way we saw early in the season, that loss to the Ravens was a bit of a wake up call. I still think right now, healthy in all the right places and the best team that we've seen in the NFC, especially when they've competed against the other top teams on that side. And the other side, I think it's Baltimore. I think they finally, the bye for them, the first round bye, and the fact that they were able to rest in week 18 for a team that has been so snake bitten by injury in recent years, where Lamar Jackson has had to play MVP football and then is walking out there with a mash unit so much so that finally at the end of the season, it's too much. Now they've got a defense that had guys like Kyle Hamilton who were banged up, who are going to get this extra time to get healthy, who's one of the most unique pieces in the NFL. But at this point, they're the favorite to win everything, rightly so, and I would absolutely have them coming out of the AFC to face a 49ers team that they've seen the ball go through the basket against and can feel very good because the offense that we all expected from Todd Monken to bring over when he was replacing Greg Roman has finally arrived, and Lamar Jackson was able to keep his standard in the same spot while everyone around him got up to the level where the receivers stopped dropping passes. They were able to overcome the injury to Mark Andrews and kind of refigure personnel and how they were going to go to attack this. And it's all happened because Lamar Jackson, even if the numbers don't necessarily back it up in the way people are used to, he's been the MVP of the league because of how important he is down in and down out to that team's success.
Look forward to seeing you here in a few weeks, Mike. Should be, it's something we've never seen before. Super Bowl in Las Vegas. It's going to be a little bit of a crazy week out there.
God help us all. I'm going to be there Sunday to Saturday. Like a full week in Vegas should
be same here.
Yeah.
Third to the no, I'm going. I'm I'm flying in Saturday and staying all the way till the next Sunday. So I'm going 8 days. For that, yeah.
Everyone, thoughts and prayers aren't required, but we would greatly appreciate them to get through this trying test.
All right, Mike. Thanks so much, man. See you in a few weeks.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.